All right, so get this. We're diving into the Northwest Passage today.
Oh, interesting.
You know, that mythical route through the Arctic everyone thought was impassable? Well, climate change is throwing a real wrench in the works, turning it into a potential shipping game changer.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
You've sent over some seriously fascinating stuff for us to unpack.
Well, it's not just about what's happening right now.
Okay.
What I think is really fascinating here is how this passage, the Northwest Passage, has captured our imaginations for centuries.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, think about explorers like Sir John Franklin,
Right.
spending years of their lives searching for this elusive route
Yeah.
and facing unimaginable hardships along the way.
Talk about dedication.
Absolutely.
And then there's Amundsen finally navigating the passage in 1906.
Right, a huge feat.
It's mind-blowing, the sheer determination of these early explorers.
It really is.
But they were also up against an incredibly harsh environment.
Oh, absolutely. Their stories
Right.
are a powerful reminder, I think, of the Arctic's unforgiving nature, even before we even start talking about all the rapid changes that are happening right now.
And those changes are happening at an alarming rate.
Very much so.
Right. I read that the Arctic is warming like twice as fast as the rest of the planet.
Yeah.
A 13% decline in sea ice per decade since the 70s.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Those are NASA's numbers. That's not just like some random blog.
Oh, no, it's very real.
Oh,
It's a phenomenon. It's called Arctic amplification.
okay.
So imagine this. You have a giant mirror, right? And it's reflecting sunlight back into space.
Okay.
That's kind of what the ice does.
All right.
But as it melts, that darker ocean water, it absorbs more heat.
I see.
And it creates a feedback loop, so it just accelerates the warming process.
So less ice means more heat absorption, which then leads to even more melting?
Exactly.
It's like a runaway train or something.
Precisely.
Okay.
And this isn't just about the Arctic ecosystem either.
Right.
This has global consequences.
Which-
Well, it impacts weather patterns, sea levels. It's a big deal.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So this legendary passage, this Northwest Passage, it's actually opening up because of this accelerated melting.
It is.
How much are we talking here?
Significantly. It's quite significant.
Wow.
So while it used to be navigable, maybe for a few weeks in the summer,
Right.
we're now seeing the potential for open waters from July to October.
July to October.
It's a big difference.
That's incredible.
It is.
That's a solid chunk of the year.
It is.
Imagine the logistical shift this represents. We're talking about, like, potentially shaving weeks off of shipping times.
Yeah.
Which could have huge ripple effects.
Absolutely.
What kind of opportunities does this open up?
Well, I mean, this is a potential game changer for global trade. New routes emerging and all that.
Right.
And you know what that means?
I'm guessing, like, lower shipping costs.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Lower shipping costs, faster delivery times.
Wow.
For a whole range of goods.
Yeah. So instead of those massive container ships taking the long way around, they could be going straight through the Arctic.
Exactly. Think about it.
Yeah.
A shorter route, it means less fuel consumption,
Okay.
reduced emissions.
Right.
And ultimately, it could even mean lower prices for consumers on certain goods.
Wow. Okay. So this is starting to sound like a win-win.
Right.
And maybe even a win-win-win,
Yeah.
shorter routes, lower costs, faster shipping.
Right.
But I imagine it's not all smooth sailing, right?
Well,
What about, like, the challenges of navigating those waters, those icy water?
you're right to be cautious. It's definitely not
Right.
as simple as just, charting a new course on a map.
Sure.
The Arctic Ocean,
Yeah.
even with less ice, presents unique challenges.
Okay.
I mean, we're talking
Like what?
unpredictable weather patterns,
Right.
potential for, like, rogue icebergs,
Yeah.
and limited search and rescue capability.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's like a trade-off between
It is. There's always a trade-off.
the potential benefits, right?
Yeah.
And then the very real risks.
Absolutely.
What kind of ships are we even talking about here? Who's, like, looking to make these trips through the Arctic?
It's not just about, those massive container ships.
Right.
Those are certainly a part of the equation.
Yeah.
We're also seeing an increase in, like, tankers
Okay.
carrying liquefied natural gas,
Okay.
LNG,
Got it.
particularly from Russia.
Okay.
They're taking advantage of these shorter routes to Asian markets.
LNG from Russia, huh? Now that you mention it, this new accessibility,
Yeah.
it's got huge economic implications, obviously, but it also kind of raises some questions about who actually controls this passage, right? It's not like there's a big "Welcome to the Northwest Passage" sign up there
Right.
with, like, tolls and rest stops.
Exactly. You're hitting on a major point of contention here.
Yeah.
Canada claims the Northwest Passage as part of their internal waters, which would give them significant control over who can and can't use it.
Right.
However,
Yeah.
the United States and several European countries argue that it should be considered an international strait,
Interesting.
allowing for free passage.
Okay, so you have Canada claiming, like, I guess,
Sort of historical.
historical ownership, strategic importance,
Exactly.
and then others are pushing for open access for global trade.
Right, a bit of standoff.
What's, like, the historical context here?
Well, it's a complex issue, obviously.
Sure.
With roots going back centuries.
Right.
For a long time, I mean, this passage was basically impassable.
Yeah.
So the question of ownership was more, I guess, theoretical than practical.
Right.
But as the ice melts
Yeah.
and the passage becomes more navigable, well, those claims and counterclaims,
Yeah.
they take on a whole new urgency.
I bet they do, right?
Yeah.
And it's not just about, like, whose right is it? There are, like, some serious power dynamics at play
Oh,
here.
absolutely.
Right.
Control over the Northwest Passage.
Yeah.
It means control over a strategically vital shipping route.
Right.
We're talking access to resources,
Okay.
potential military advantages,
Wow.
even the ability to influence, like, global trade patterns.
Yeah.
These are high stakes.
Yeah.
And that's why we're seeing, increased military presence in the region, particularly from countries like Russia and the United States.
Wow. It's almost like a new kind of Cold War, but with, like, cargo ships and tankers instead of submarines?
In a way, yeah.
Wow.
It's a delicate balancing act.
Right.
Trying to, I guess,
Yeah.
reap the economic benefits of a more accessible Arctic,
Right.
while also managing the geopolitical tensions
Right.
and the potential for conflict.
Yeah. It's a lot to process, you know?
Yeah.
Economic opportunity, geopolitical maneuvering, and all this is playing out against the backdrop of a rapidly changing Arctic.
Exactly.
But there's, like, another layer to this whole thing, isn't there? The
Yeah.
environmental impact of increased traffic through the Northwest Passage.
Of course.
What does that look like?
Well, it's the other side of the coin, as they say, and it's a significant concern.
Right.
The Arctic ecosystem,
Yeah.
incredibly fragile.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about a region with unique species. They've adapted to survive in some of the harshest conditions on Earth.
Yeah.
Increased shipping traffic, well, it brings with it the risk of oil spills,
Yeah, of course.
noise pollution,
Right.
disruptions to migratory patterns.
An oil spill, that would be devastating, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
I can't even imagine the impact on those pristine waters.
It's a grim scenario, but one we have to consider.
Yeah.
An oil spill in the Arctic.
Right.
It wouldn't just be a local disaster.
No.
It would have, long-lasting consequences for the entire ecosystem.
Wow.
Cleanup efforts would be incredibly challenging.
Right, because it's so remote.
Exactly, in such a remote and unforgiving environment.
Yeah.
And the impact on wildlife, well, it could be catastrophic.
So what can be done? I mean, is there a way to balance
That's the question, isn't it?
the economic interests with environmental protection in a place like this?
It's a question with no easy answers.
Right.
But international cooperation is absolutely crucial.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The Arctic Council, for example, which includes, countries with Arctic territory,
Okay.
has a significant role to play in developing and enforcing environmental regulations
Right.
for shipping in the region.
So they'd be the ones, like, setting the rules of the road, so to speak,
Exactly.
for the Northwest Passage.
Right. We're talking about things like requiring ships to use cleaner fuels,
Okay.
establishing stricter navigation routes,
Right.
to avoid sensitive areas,
Right.
and, of course, having emergency response plans in place
Right.
in case of an accident.
Of course, that makes sense. But what about, like, technological solutions?
Oh, absolutely.
Are there any, like, innovations out there that could, help mitigate these risks?
Absolutely. There's a lot of research and development happening.
In what areas?
Well, in areas like ice-resistant ship design,
Okay.
advanced navigation systems.
So they know where they're going.
Exactly. And they use real-time ice data.
Wow.
And even, autonomous vessels,
Really?
which could potentially reduce the risk of human error.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
No, not at all.
There are proactive steps being taken to address these concerns.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the potential risks
Right.
and taking responsibility for mitigating them.
Yeah.
This isn't just about protecting the Arctic.
Right.
It's about understanding that what happens in the Arctic affects us all.
That's a really powerful thought, and I think it's a good place to kind of, wrap things up.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from
Yeah.
the history of exploration
Right.
to, geopolitical tensions and
Yeah.
the environmental challenges of changing Arctic. I mean, what stands out to you most about the Northwest Passage?
I think it's the perfect example of how interconnected our world truly is.
How so?
Well, what was once this frozen barrier, right?
Yeah.
It's now a potential shortcut.
Right.
It's reshaping trade routes,
Right.
sparking geopolitical competition,
Yeah.
and of course, raising these crucial questions about environmental responsibility.
It's true, and it's like this stark reminder that we're not just like witnessing these changes, we're
Earth?
part of them.
Wow.
And the choices we make today, well, they're going to determine the fate of this extraordinary region.
They will.
So the Northwest Passage, this path, right, sought for centuries, it's now open,
It is.
but it begs the question,
It does.
at what cost?
Exactly.
And will we rise to meet the challenges of this new era, or will we, repeat the mistakes of the past?
That's the question we have to ask ourselves.
That's something for all of you listening out there to ponder.
It is.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep exploring.